All right, welcome everyone. I have started a podcast. This is exciting. This is new. I am going to be as completely honest. I have no idea how I want to start this thing. I have no idea how to start new things. I've been thinking intro, whether I want music, whether I want sound. And the only thing I keep coming back to is I just going to start. We're just going to start. Welcome everybody to the corner of Garden and West. Welcome to the Garden and West podcast. Don't worry, I will touch on the name, but I do want to start with just, a welcome and an introduction of myself. Really want to, in this first episode, really just talk about why I'm doing this, my goal for doing this, what I'm expecting, what I hope you will be expecting from this new passion project. The first thing I want to talk about is just who am I? I imagine that most of the people who are listening to this, at least this first episode, already know who I am and most of my background. But for the off chance that we have listeners who have no idea what they're listening to or who I am. My name is Ryan Smoot. I go by Smoot. I have not been called Ryan since the third grade. And that's what I answer to. It's just a habit at this point. I was born and raised in Charleston, West Virginia in 2011 after my mother passed. Uh, Moved to Dallas, Texas, and I have been in Dallas, Texas since 11. I have been now married for 2 years. I do have two teenage daughters who are 15 and 13. That would be who I am in a nutshell. I don't think there's a lot to me when it comes to the basics of who, what, when, where, and why. However, that is the logistics. Um, so why? Why am I entering this space? Why am I entering the podcast space where it is saturated? There are a lot of people entering this space, especially when you see so many comments or you see someone say something really interesting and or controversial, and you go to the comment section, and the first thing that you see in the comment section is comments to say, "Why does this person have a mic in front of their face?" Not everyone needs a mic in front of their face, so why would I want to start something where I sit down and I have a mic in front of my face? The first answer is because of the encouragement of those around me. My wife has often asked me when I was going to start a podcast, mainly because I have my hands in a lot of bags. And what I mean by that is I can have 10 conversations going on at the same time within the course of my day, and it be about 10 totally different topics. I will talk sports with the boys. I can talk the social media things with my wife. I'm talking religion with my brother. I am talking politics and mental health with my sister. I can have 10 conversations going on in the course of a day, and all 10 be about different topics. And so, yeah, I have had encouragement from my wife. I've had encouragement from my brother and my sister. And I think I'm going to stop here and just kind of put this out there now. If you hear me say my brother, my sister, 99% of the times, I may not be talking about my biological brother or sister. Biologically, I have two older sisters and I have a younger brother. However, I'm Black. I have 20 to 30 other people that I call my brother or sister because I have that many close friends. Or you'll hear me talk about cousins, have a lot of cousins that are realistically not actually my cousins. But, in the culture, that's just how it goes. A lot of them are my mama's best friend's kids, and we grew up together. But I just have so many different people in my life that have encouraged me to start this venture to um, bring the world in on my conversations. I don't claim to be an expert on anything. However, I do feel like I do know a little about a lot, but there are some subjects that I know a lot about a little. So it can go either way, but I promise to be truthful. I promise it'll be entertaining. I don't know much about where this is going to go, but I do know for sure that there are at least 5 episodes and there are at least going to be 5 topics that I want to touch on right away. And my goal is for these topics to be insightful, for them to be thought provoking, for people to be able to express themselves. I will be having my brother and my sister on to talk with me about subjects that, we discuss on a daily basis. And I think these conversations are happening everywhere. And I think that these are the type of conversations that the younger generation is really missing, which kind of brings us to why the name. Why the name Garden and West? Like I said, I grew up in uh, Charleston, West Virginia. I grew up mainly on Garden Street on the west side of Charleston, on the hills, as we call it. Charleston has the hills and they have the flats. I grew up on Garden Street on the hills. I grew up in a little greenhouse that sat on the corner of Garden Street and West Avenue. Beside me lived my uncle, uh, again, my dad's best friend, but my Uncle Sonny and my Aunt Kay. Throughout growing up, many of my Saturdays were spent just sitting on the porch with my uncle and my dad and listening to them talk, uh, listening, listening to them tell stories about the old days, so to speak. Really wanted, actually, just kind of a tidbit. I really wanted to call this podcast the front porch. That's what I wanted to call it. However, you do discover when you start something new that you're not the only one that has that idea. You're not the only one that has probably thought of that name. The number of things out there called the front porch was really interesting. So I stopped and I prayed on it, and I wanted something that stuck to the nature and the heart of why I really want to enter this space. And so Garden and West, because I grew up and I learned many lessons that I carry with me to this day, sitting on the porch of a house that sat on the corner of Garden and West. But I really also wanted to stick to the true nature of the passion that I have for those conversations that I sat and I listened to for so many years. Me and my brother talked the other day, and I told him I really don't feel like this new generation are having those front porch conversations. They're not having conversations where this new generation is sitting down and just listening to their elders. They're not listening to their aunts and uncles. Everyone loves the word aunties and unks. Those are very popular words in today's society, but they're just titles. You got people who literally just hit a certain age and call themselves an unk, and they're not really an uncle. It's really weird to me. However, I think in that space, we're just missing conversations with the younger generation. Kids aren't as willing to sit down and just be in a space where they're not expected to talk. They're not expected to have an input. Nowadays with phones and cameras and mics available to everyone, anyone can say what they want, when they want, however they want, to who they want, and broadcast it to the world. But I think sometimes in that people don't value the ability or the time that it takes just to sit there and listen. Sometimes just sitting and listening and not saying anything is important. And so I want to be able to have those conversations that maybe aren't being had on front porches anymore, but somehow we can still get them out to the world. My Uncle Sonny lived a very interesting life. And so sitting and listening to his stories were always the best part of my Saturday. We woke up and, West Virginia is it's so different from living in a big city. I've now been in Dallas for 15, 16 years. And sometimes I still ride through downtown and I just think that this city is way too big it's way too big for this small town country boy. The buildings are gigantic. The streets are always busy. The houses are not close together. One of the things I loved about sitting on the front porch and loved about living so close to my uncle was the houses in West Virginia, especially where we lived, are very close together. I could stand in between our house and my Uncle Sonny's house and stretch out my arms and be touching east side of the house. Rarely did my Uncle Sonny actually come and sit on our porch. Saturday mornings, he woke up. I wish I knew how to whistle. My Uncle Sonny he would do this whistle that literally would echo throughout the street. And then he would say, "Hey, Brock." My dad's name was Brockman. He would call my dad Brock, and he would whistle, and he would say, "Hey, Brock," and he would yell it, and that was pretty much the alarm clock for the whole street, for the whole block. When you heard Uncle Sonny whistle and you heard him say, "Hey, Brock," everyone kind of woke up. Everyone also woke up because they were really loud. So once they got on the porch and started talking, if you were still asleep, you woke up with them laughing or them yelling at each other, depending on what the topic was. Whether they were talking about fishing, whether they were talking about my Uncle Sonny was a truck driver. So whether they were talking about something that happened on the road, a shipment he was driving, something in that nature. But usually Saturdays on Garden Street started with a whistle and a Brock. And then everyone was up and moving and they were sitting on porches and everyone was talking. So I just valued that conversations that took place. Uncle Sonny taught me things that weren't taught in schools. He was a Black Panther. The only thing I ever knew about the Black Panthers was what they taught us maybe one day a year during Black History Month. They never taught us the actual, start. Why did the Black Panthers start? What did they do? It wasn't until I was sitting on the front porch with my Uncle Sonny that I learned that the Black Panthers, had food programs that were feeding the neighborhoods that were these food deserts in the Black. I didn't know about the educational programs that they had. They had, you know, these programs that helped educate Black people at a time where Black people's education was not good. I always used to tell people when I would talk about my dad dropped out of high school. And when my dad dropped out of high school, they weren't being taught the best of things. They wasn't given the Black people were not being given the best education. My dad, when he dropped out of high school, what he was learning back then in high school would probably be equivalent to probably a third or fourth grade education now. So my Uncle Sonny sitting and telling me stories of the Black Panther. I remember going to school one day and challenging my teacher on the history of Black Panthers and Huey P. Newton and bringing up how, the NRA formed because of Black people storming the Capitol with guns, exercising their right to carry. And my uncle, I always saw pictures. My uncle was with them when they uh, stormed the Capitol with those guns. I always loved hearing him tell me those stories. I always loved listening to the stories that he would tell about being a truck driver to the point that I remember my ninth grade year, so many people were making other plans for spring break. My spring break, I spent out on the road with my uncle, just the stories he told and how much fun it sounded. And even the love I have for country music now stems because my uncle always listened to country music. And I can never figure out why this Black man who was a Black Panther loved country music. And he would always say, because when you're out on the road, you don't get every radio station. And not everywhere you drive through, in every little town that you drive through, do they have a R&B station or do they have a hip hop station? But every single town that you drive through, they had a country station. And I remember the first country song he ever really used to play for me was Earl Had to Die. I believe that was by the Dixie Chicks, or maybe no, yeah, it was the Dixie Chicks, but it was Earl Had to Die. That was the first country song that I memorized. Sitting on that front porch with my Uncle Sonny, he taught me um, about what interest was. I remember going to my Uncle Sonny and going, "Hey, can I borrow $5?" And he was just like, "Hey, if you're old enough to start asking to borrow money from me, then you're old enough to learn about interest." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "The interest between me and you will be a quarter on a dollar." And I was like, "What?" He was like, "It will be a quarter on the dollar," which means for every dollar that you borrow from me, you owe me a quarter. And I remember looking at him real confused. And I remember him going, "So if you borrow $5 from me, you owe me 6.25." And I was like, "That don't make sense." He's like, "Yes, it does." He's like, "Because you have to understand that if you start going out here and you start asking to borrow money from people, if you walk into a bank one day and you ask them to borrow money, they're going to charge you interest. You just don't get to pay back what you borrow. You're going to have to put something on it." And so from that time on until the day he passed away, me and my Uncle Sonny ever borrowed money from each other. It was a quarter on a dollar. And that was something that I took with me all the way uh, to this point in life. I remember my freshman year of college. The first thing they did is they invited, might go off on a tangent here, but it's really interesting because there's so many age requirements for certain things in America. But if you go on a college campus that first week and you walk into the student union, you're going to see banks with booths set up, signing up these 17 and 18-year-olds that have no idea about money. They're signing them up for credit cards. I remember the first week of my freshman year going into our student union, and there was a bank signing us up for credit cards, and they were getting people because they were offering you free pizza. If you signed up for the credit card, you got a free Papa John's pizza. And I remember signing up, and then I remember looking at the little paperwork and the fine print and the interest on what you buy and how much you were owed them. And I never wanted to use that credit card because I was just like, look at this interest that they're going to charge us if we use this thing. But all I cared about was the free pizza because, young and dumb. So I remember him teaching me about interest. I remember him teaching me about things that were not taught in schools. And I feel like we have not held on to that as a society. And that you can say what you want about the up and coming generation and younger people. I think that the older generation, my generation, has dropped the ball on having them front porch conversations where we just set out and talk and really be able to, invest in their future that doesn't involve having something electronic in their hands. So that's the name, Garden and West, because that is where so much of my life took place, but it's also where so much of the things that shaped me into who I am today took place. It's where that stems from. So, what is my vision? Like, what is the vision? What do I want to accomplish with this? First and foremost, my goal is to be myself, to have the same conversations that I have with my friends daily, to still have those conversations now, just now with mics in front of our face. Those conversations stem from political conversations to conversations about mental health. Um, I want to talk, and I have a friend in mind who I want to have one and talk about men's mental health. He lost a friend who was close to him through suicide because the friend suffered from mental health, which kind of opened his eyes to mental health. I have gone through my own mental health issues that have been able to shape me and open up relationships with people um, that really was not there until I was open about my mental health. I like to talk sports. I will be talking about sports. I will always be talking about current events. I would definitely be talking about political things that are happening. Politics is such a hotbed for topics nowadays, but not necessarily just the politics themselves, but also how relationships have um, changed so much due to the political climate. I pride myself in having such a wide spectrum of friends in my life. I have Republican friends, I have Democrat friends, I have progressive friends. Me, myself, I guess you can say it's progressive. I'm more of a right wing, left wing, same bird type of person. I am a part of the matter are people being taken care of. Well, have my best friend on, and me and her will talk about those relationships, and especially coming from a small state like West Virginia, where West Virginia ranks dead last in education, I believe, if not 50th. I believe they're 48th in education. They're 48th or 47th in growth. Not a lot of people leave there. And a lot of people venture out from the state. So their worldviews are skewed a little bit just because they don't know. Again, coming from West Virginia and moving to Texas, the city of Plano has a larger population than the whole state of West Virginia. So just discussing how that's shaped relationships, how politics have shaped relationships. Myself can maybe on one hand count the number of friends that I truly have unfriended or distanced myself from just due to their political opinion. Because nowadays, again, in the politics that are happening nowadays, if you support certain people, I just, at 41 years old, I can't help but to think that you're racist. And at 41 years old, I can't go along anymore with an ignoring. I can't go along with just dismissing certain things as that's just who you are. Sometimes I can't be associated with that. So I can probably count on my hand the number of people I really have just distanced myself from simply due to their political thoughts and their political beliefs. Everyone else, I'm always willing to hear what a person has to say about what they believe. In this political climate, I think we are such a long ways off from the John McCain of it all. And what I mean by that is I don't think, well, I think we're far removed from a day where two people can be running for political office and someone who supports them say something negative about their opponent and the person stops and goes, hey, let's not do that. If you don't know what I'm talking about, there was a during the race when Obama was running against McCain, and someone said something very negative about Obama during a town hall meeting. And John McCain clearly said, no, let's not do that. He's a wonderful man. Yes, we disagree on things politically, but Barack Obama, as a human, as a man, is a wonderful person. And I'm paraphrasing, but he supported Obama. He quickly dismissed this negative attack on his opponent. And I don't think that we're going to be back to those days anytime soon. But there's so many conversations that you can have in today's world about how do you manage those relationships? How do those relationships affect your mental health? I like to talk sports, so we'll be talking sports. I am a wrestling nerd. I have been watching wrestling since I was 7 years old. I love the fantasy book wrestling. I love to sit down and just think about the storylines. I look at wrestling like people look at their favorite television show. It has a script, it is practice, and then it is performed. The only difference with wrestling is it's typically performed in front of thousands of people. If they mess up a line, they get made fun of, they get laughed at. If they mess up a move, there is no stopping the camera. There is no retakes for the most part. They mess up in front of 1,000 people, and it's across the world on social media within minutes. But I love the pageantry of what wrestling is, the characters. I have a friend that I hope to come on who will talk with wrestling, who will talk wrestling with me, because we look at it in two different ways. He's what the wrestling world calls a sicko. He likes blood in his wrestling. He wants to see people get, you know, hurt, so to speak. He likes to see people use weapons. That's not me. I just want a good story between the good guy and the bad guy, with the good guy winning after, a couple months. I don't need blood. I don't need weapons. They're nice sometimes. I love a good ladder match, but I don't need it for my wrestling. I will have my brother on to talk religion. I am, Team Jesus. I love me some God. Um, but I would be lying if I said that I don't struggle sometimes with a balancing act between what it really means to be a good Christian and what it means to be a good person. You would think those two things go hand in hand. But again, as we touch on the political aspect of things, we will see that they don't always line up. And my brothers, who I go to kind of have these conversations with, I am going through a Bible in the Year program, and this is my second time going through during, reading the Bible in a year. And let me tell you, when it comes to the Old Testament, I have questions. I have so many questions about the Old Testament. It's weird. It is a hard read. It is a boring read sometimes. And these are conversations where I will text my brother and I'm like, this is so boring. Why? I have a hard time believing some of these people's names. I just do. Some of these names don't make sense. I It's hard. So he's who I go to have these conversations because as he told me last time, he brought up maybe I'm looking at it from the wrong perspective. So yeah, conversations that cover such a wide variety of things and just have real people talking. I've always enjoyed talking with people, which funny enough, I'm such a type A person. I'm such an introvert when it comes to going out in public at times until I'm comfortable in my surroundings. And then I'm a social butterfly. But for the most part, I don't really like talking to new people. I always look at it this way, or I always think of I like to equate things to like my favorite television shows. Like I can quote Friends line for line every episode. I can quote The Big Bang Theory. I can quote Glee, Martin, Fresh Prince. It's just Modern Family. There's just so many things that can be equated to what you really enjoy in life. And sometimes I just really like sitting down and watching the same episode of a television show that I've seen 20 times. But I'm very much a person that I don't like change. So this is new for me. This is a change for me. So yeah, that's my goal. My goal is just to have my everyday conversations with my everyday friends with some mics in front of our face and hope that people find it interesting, find what we think is thought provoking. Hopefully, you find thought provoking. Hopefully, it encourages you to go out and ask more questions, to have more front porch conversations with those around you, pass down some knowledge to the younger generation. I see these microphones and I see these cords, and when people believe in you, when people think you would be good at something, even when you may not think it yourself, I think you owe it to those people who encourage you to at least give it a shot. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to give it a shot. We're going to talk. Like I said, I know for sure we're going to have at least 5 episodes. I believe the next time you hear my voice, we will be talking about the political aspect in the relationships. And how it has taken a toll relationships in people's personal lives. We'll be talking about religion in the Old Testament versus the New Testament and how we should be looking at it, how we should be reading the Bible. So yeah, I'm excited. I thank you for taking your time out of your day to listen to me. I thank you for those who have supported me, for those who will share this, for those who will become regular listeners. I really do look forward to sitting down in front of a mic and having these conversations. Again, I always look at it and I always, when thinking about this, growing up in a little greenhouse at the corner of Garden and West, that corner holds so many memories because I remember like when we would walk to school, when we were in junior high, I would meet my friends at that corner and we would talk and then we would walk to school together. When we were in high school and we had to walk down the hill to catch the bus, we all met on that corner and talked and then we walked down the hill together. I'm pretty sure this goes out to, a lot of people in a lot of areas, but, we just hung out on the corner. Sometimes we just went other places and met up with friends and hung out on the corner where we just sat and talked and joked and laughed and sung and just danced and had a good time. And so, my goal, my passion, my hope, my desire for this is just to be a place where, real conversations will cross paths, different perspectives will meet, where nothing is off limits. When you have real people talking about real experiences, that is my goal. That is my hope. That is my desire. So every corner has a story, and this will be ours. I look forward to writing these pages, telling these stories, sharing these experiences. And until next time, have a good day.